Welcome to ZenLeader, where we empower women to tap into their confidence, discover their voice, and find calm in the chaos. Join your host, Dr. Jodi Blinco, founder of ZenLeader, motivational speaker, self-help coach, and author of Inner Alchemy, as we have unfiltered and unscripted conversations with inspiring women from around the globe. Here's your host, Dr. Jodi Blinco.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the ZenLeader Podcast. I am so excited about our guest today. I know you all are going to take so much from this conversation. Dr. Emily Garber, welcome. She comes to us with a master's in, listen to this, physical therapy. I was fascinated by this, by your background, Emily. Dr. Emily, master's in physical therapy and a PhD in psychology and industrial and organizational psychology. Now, that's a really long title. I know we were talking about this before we hit record, but either way, Emily has really done some fascinating work around compassion fatigue, which I am sure you all are already, the interest is piqued to hear about compassion fatigue. I have so much respect for Emily and the work that she's done, the passion that she has for really developing leaders, developing and coaching the folks that she has worked with over the years, and how she has continued to channel this into some really unique work. So Emily, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending some time with us this morning. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here, and to be quite honest, a little bit nervous. So
that's all right. We got this. We got this. So Emily, I think one of the things that we love to talk about here is just really the authenticity of the human journey and how people get to where they are. You have accomplished some really impressive things and continue to do fantastic work. So tell us how you got to the journey of where you are now, the physical therapy, the psychology focus. Share with us.
Well, again, thank you. And I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to share. So I got a bachelor's degree in exercise physiology, and I knew that I wanted to continue my education. And so I immediately went into physical therapy school, graduated with the master's, practiced for 8-9 years. And toward the end of that, I realized that I was experiencing some burnout, not enjoying my work as much as I had in the beginning and would like to have continued to enjoy it. So I started to look for other avenues. And I came across a job posting for a physical therapist assistant educator. And I decided to pursue that. And so that's what took me to higher ed. I knew I still loved the subject matter of physical therapy, but I also knew I needed to do something with it that was different than patient care. And so to me, it was a wonderful way to utilize my degree, but in a different way. And so I entered higher ed around 2010. And I loved it in the beginning. I was just so enamored with the idea of helping people in a different way, still through physical therapy and education. I love learning. Continuous growth and learning are part of my values. And so it was just a wonderful blend in the beginning. Shortly after I started in higher ed, I knew I wanted to continue learning and continue my education. And so I decided I wanted to go back for a PhD. And I had experience as a physical therapist with one-on-one educating people, but I knew in my role as an educator and being in the classroom and being a head of a program in a department that I needed to learn more about groups and teams and that kind of thing. So that's what led me to psychology with an emphasis in industrial and organizational psychology. And so that was a long and arduous process that I'm so proud that I completed and accomplished. But it really helped to frame some of the work that I did thereafter. And I'll tell you, there was a turning point when COVID hit and the pandemic came around, and there were a lot of changes, obviously, in everybody's lives. And during that time, so I have 2 small children. They were obviously smaller during that time. We had gone to remote work, and I really started to struggle in my personal life. And I realized, coming out of that and the changes that happened because of that, I noticed the evolution of my leadership in my professional world. in my work life, and how that changed and the way I looked at things differently because of the changes that were happening in my personal life. And so I started to become more aware of who I was as a leader, what my impact was on my faculty and staff, and engagement and connection and sense of belonging, and being able to show up authentically, not only in your own personal space, but at work as
Yeah.
well. And so fast forward to this compassion fatigue topic, I got some feedback, some constructive feedback from a former student in our program, and I looked at it and I shared it with my faculty. And it was hard to hear, it was because it was criticism, and it was valid and all good points. And I could tell that my faculty were having trouble hearing it as well. And I said, you know what? I think we're all kind of struggling with compassion fatigue. And we had some awareness of what that is, because in healthcare, it's very prevalent. So
Yeah.
for those who don't know, compassion fatigue is when you have physical, emotional, psychological impact of being exposed to other people suffering. And so, based on the feedback that I got from this former student, and all of the time and energy and effort that I saw my faculty and staff putting into student success and student development and their courses and teaching and all that kind of stuff, it made me realize that everyone's trying their best. There was no one that I was like, man, we really need to have a conversation about what you're doing and productivity and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Literally everyone is trying their best. And so I said, you know what, I saw a need. We need to learn more about compassion fatigue. We need to learn more about what we're doing and how we might be able to change things so that we can all grow and develop and come out on the other side of this in a better, healthier, positive way. And so that's why I created this compassion fatigue in higher education training and shared it with my faculty and staff, and ultimately the whole institution, in the hopes that we could all learn and grow and hopefully be better.
I have a million questions. I just am deciding which route to go right now. Before I ask some follow-up questions, can you just re-clarify, because I think what you did as you were sharing was really define compassion fatigue for folks. Can you just re-clarify
Sure.
how to define that?
So compassion fatigue can also be known as secondary traumatic stress. And it's commonly seen in people that are in caregiver roles, teachers, educators, service-oriented professions. And so what happens is you're exposed to other people's pain and suffering. And through that prolonged exposure, it starts to impact you and your health and well-being. And so that's essentially what compassion fatigue is.
Okay. So I am sure people listening to this right now are like, oh my gosh, I can absolutely relate to that. Number one. Can you give us some indicators that are maybe subtle and maybe not conscious, that we're not conscious of, that would indicate, hey, maybe we should pay attention to this. I am struggling with this.
Sure.
What would that look like? How does that manifest?
Absolutely. So compassion fatigue can manifest in a variety of different ways. Physically, you might notice that you're fatigued, you have sleep disturbances, possibly there are health issues. Emotionally, you might be experiencing anxiety, feelings of hopelessness, um, disengagement. I don't know if you've heard the term quiet quitting. You might be
Yeah.
trying to withdraw from emotional tasks. You might be trying to withdraw from professional tasks. And then behaviorally, that lack of motivation. I don't really feel like joining that other committee. I don't really feel like trying to take on another project. So it can affect all areas of your life. And so that's the personal aspect of it. There's also, when we're talking about higher education, institutionally, there are some risk factors for institutions. And so, and that's an area that I think is really interesting, because, in the industrial and organizational psychology world, we're talking about not only people, but the people that create the institution. So institutionally, if it's an organization that has high workload demands and they're not really paying attention to the well-being of their employees, or if the people at that institution lack healthy boundaries and they're not supporting healthy boundaries within their employees. Institutional culture is huge on that. So there could be some contributing factors in that regard as well.
Yeah. And, institution and organizationally, right? This can exist in any organization, business, institution,
Absolutely.
small, large. This is, again, and I'm sure people listening are like, yeah, I do this role in this company and I can relate to what you're sharing. Okay. So is it fair to say that, or is it fair and is it common for compassion fatigue to exist and be there, and someone maybe is, I'm going to use the word blaming or looking at or putting it on other things because they don't even know that compassion fatigue is a thing. So they say, well, I'm disengaged, or I'm tired, or I'm bored, or I'm exhausted because I'm not getting enough sleep. And I'm not getting enough sleep because of X, Y, and Z. Is that common?
So I do want to clarify. I'm definitely not an expert in this. I've obviously done a little bit of research. So I would say yes, I think it is common. I think a lot of what we need to do is get to the heart of the problem, get down to the root of why these things are happening, and try and address the actual root cause versus some of the symptoms. So like you said, if someone's dealing with sleep issues or disengagement, the question is why? Why are we doing that? And so I think that is definitely one of the components of trying to figure out how to deal with it and how
Yeah.
to figure out how to move past it.
Yep. And take me back. You talked about earlier in your work in physical therapy, when you were on the patient care side, you started to notice some of this for yourself, or you were just feeling burnout, and hence the transition into a different component. What were some of the, because that's not an easy transition to make, I wouldn't think, right? You went to school for this, you've invested so much time in the direct patient care side, and now you make this significant career transition, or what maybe I'm interpreting it as significant. So talk to us just about that process for you. What were, how did you find the courage? How did you take the steps? How did you talk yourself through? I'm sure you had moments of, no, maybe I shouldn't. Yes, you should. Walk
Yeah,
us through that.
absolutely. So while I was toward the end of my patient care experience, I noticed that my perspective on patients shifted. It went from being very caring and concerned and wanting to give and give and give, and at the end it was one of those situations where I started to feel almost resentment, and that's absolutely not what you want your your
Yeah.
caregiver, your
Yeah.
healthcare provider to be feeling. And it was in part because I started to feel like, this was my perspective at the time, that patients were looking at me and expecting me to fix them, and that there was little to no ownership taken on their part.
Wow.
And so, and that was, again, I say that was my perspective. Obviously, there were patients that were taking responsibility and that kind of
Sure.
thing, but I was looking at it as like, I almost can't do this anymore because I don't have it in me to give. And that was really demoralizing. And you realize that I'm not an effective physical therapist anymore. I'm not able to give when I need to give to these patients who deserve more.
Yeah.
And so I knew a change needed to happen. I was, ironically, or maybe not and at all, I was also dealing with personal issues at that time. And so it was a big period of transition. Not only did I quit my job as a physical therapist, but the career in direct patient care, and I moved to a new career in higher ed, but I also moved to a new city and moved, and I shouldn't say new, I moved back home, but
Mhm.
I moved to a different city. I moved home. And so there was all these changes that were going on at once. And so it was really a time I took a huge leap because I moved without having a job. I knew of the job. I knew I was going to be interviewing at the job, but I didn't know if I was going to be getting it. And so it was one of those situations where I was like, I just knew a change needed to happen.
Yeah.
And I had to take the leap and almost be like, okay, universe, we're going to see where this goes. And hopefully it turns out okay. And thankfully it did. And so that's where the whole patient care to higher ed transition came from.
And do you recall, and you shared a little bit with us, okay, I'm just going to be open. Let's see where this goes. You're changing careers, you're moving back home, but to a different city. I mean, those are all significant stressors. Any personal experience, insights, inspiration, recommendations you would offer to someone who's listening to this right now, who's sitting in that space where maybe they're getting ready or they're contemplating, or they know that voice of change is getting louder and louder and louder? Just from human being to human being, what words of wisdom can you offer on how do you take the leap? How do you coach yourself through that? How do you work through the fear? I think that's super real.
Yeah, I definitely had to look at that situation and say, what's scarier? Staying where I'm at and trying to do exactly what I've been doing, or making this change and trying something new, knowing that in my gut, like I need to make that change. So
Yeah.
it was definitely scarier for me to pretend and inauthentically live this life that I knew I had already left behind emotionally and mentally. It was just physically I was still there.
Yeah.
So I needed to realign, my body, heart, and soul and take this leap and move forward. And ultimately, that was one of the most empowering things, to take control of my own life and kind of
Mhm.
take back control, I guess. It felt like you'd kind of lost a little bit of control, lost a little bit of yourself because you'd given away and disconnected and done all these things. And so by taking that control back and showing myself that I could do this, it was very empowering. And it was scary, but it had to happen. And it was just one of those things where I'm like, for my own self-preservation, I'm
Yeah.
going to do this for myself.
Yeah. That there's so much power in what you just shared. And I think, again, as human beings, we can relate to many times in our life when we've had those feelings of, I need to do something here, because if I don't, I know what to expect. This place that I'm in, I might not be happy with it. I might be depleting multiple parts of me, but there's safety in, I call it the box, right?
Right.
There's this box. I know what's in that corner, what's in that corner. I know where the ceiling is. I know where all the dust bunnies are. I don't like it, but I know what to expect. And that expectations, that kind of safety is dangerous in its
It
own way.
is. It is, especially when you look back and you realize the damage that happened from staying in the box.
Mm,
So it's one of those things where what's scarier, the damage that you know is going to happen, or the unknown that may or may not be damage. It's just an unknown.
tell it. Tell it, Emily. I love it. Yes. Yes. It's so true. So true. But it's simple in concept, but not easy to navigate in
Yeah,
life.
definitely not. Definitely not. That takes courage for sure.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, so the PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. Talk to me about how that work has the opportunity, just in general, the concept of what that is and how that has an opportunity to make impact on organizations, institutions, because, obviously we've been talking about compassion fatigue and how that shows up. I know you're super passionate about coaching and developing people. Obviously, probably part of the reason you went down the path that you went down. So where you sit and what you see and the passion that you have, where does that work plug in on a larger scale? And I think it's really a timely conversation right now for where we are in the world of, there's a million things pulling on us as human beings. There's a lot of noise in the world. There's a lot of distractions, technical distractions, life distractions, so where does that work fit and what is the impact? And I know it's a really big question. So just,
Sure.
yeah, fill it in with whatever resonates.
Well, I'll tell you what initially came to my mind was that's a great question because I think I'm trying to figure that out as we speak.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm in another period of transition. And I know I went into the field of organizational psychology because there was a point in time where I felt somewhat pigeonholed by the physical therapy degree because I knew that I could do so much more with it, but it didn't seem like the people that I was interacting with saw those connections. And so I wanted to expand when I went back to school into something broader. And that's where the organizational psychology came into play. But as I've been working with what I've learned in my current profession and job, I realized that I'm very much interested in, like you said, the development, the leadership development, the people development, but also systems and processes and understanding the impact that good or not good systems and processes have on institutions, organizations, and the people that have to implement
Mhm.
those systems and processes
Mhm.
and policies. And so for me, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to not only help individuals grow, but also organizations and institutions become more effective by looking at some of these things and the impact that they have on people and the people that are in those, employed in those settings.
Yeah. And I think we share that passion in that the the human being at the center of it all, whether we're talking about work or life. I think oftentimes the human being and the impact to the human being is lost on a lot of my passion and work focuses on skill development and really helping people develop the tools, the pathways, the confidence. And you don't just develop confidence, right? That's kind of earned as you go, but helping the human being develop in that way and also understand the impact of all the stuff that's either working for them in a positive way or working against them in a not so positive way. So that impact to the individual is so powerful. And I think too, from an organizational standpoint, whatever organization, whatever structure it is, whoever you serve as your end customer, if you will, if we forget that there is a human being to work through, and I know AI is super popular in the world right now, but AI will absolutely have a place. It has a place. You're not going to replace the human being entirely. So finding
Absolutely.
a way to support, work through, and develop that human being at the center is critical. And if you're thinking about this from a human resources perspective or a leadership perspective, how are you creating a world or an experience for people where they don't have compassion fatigue, they don't have fatigue, they don't dread coming in or opening up the computer or sitting on your meetings? What experience are you creating for your people? And I think there's so many elements of what you've shared in this conversation that, again, no matter what role you're in, what industry, what vertical, who you work for, there's a lot to think about there. And that's your responsibility as a leader.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought in AI and the technology piece because, as we move into the future and the AI is becoming more prevalent, technology, data, all that kind of stuff, we have to double down on the importance of human connection and that sense of belonging and, just interacting with each other as humans because otherwise it'll be just a scary place.
Well, and I think one could offer, I was going to say argue, and then I changed my choice. One could offer, unless human beings completely go away, there will always be a need for human connection. That's the ultimate differentiator, especially nowadays when you think about marketing to a consumer and really connecting to a consumer, somewhere in there is a storyline and a human being that a human being's going, oh yeah, I can relate to that,
Right.
because we're leaning toward automation. And I love how you said, as we move into the future, all of the components that the future offers, yeah, let's absolutely optimize and streamline and become efficient.
For sure.
I'm a huge proponent of that.
Yes.
But the danger, the caution in that is completely removing the human being. And then what? And from what I see on my work in the higher ed space, from a student journey, student, perspective, there is the institutions that are working to find that balance of where do we keep the human being and where do we optimize, are the ones that will continue to differentiate versus just how can we scale, how can we optimize.
Right.
The ones that I see do that on the student journey, it comes through loud and clear that you're working with an agent, and I'm not downplaying any of that, but what I'm saying is, and the message here is, the human being has a place.
Absolutely.
And then in connection to our discussion, how do you take care of and develop and support and think about that human being holistically so that they can offer their best to your organization, to your institution, whoever, whatever operation you're running.
Absolutely. And I think, back to the realm of higher ed and possibly other organizations as well, that there are some institutions that the focus is on the student. Rightfully so. The focus should be on the student. However, I would offer versus argue, I would
Yeah.
offer that the focus should be on people, that it should be people-centered institutions versus student-centered institutions, because, and again, background in healthcare, the faculty and staff are the ones that are helping the student to get where they need to go. And if we're not taking care of the faculty and staff, then they're not going to be able to take care of the student. And so the overall effectiveness of the organization is going to plummet.
Goes down. Yeah. Yep. And I do think that's a missed opportunity often across the board. From what I see with the ZenLeader work, with working in higher ed, we want more. And we forget that there is an individual in that space that's driving that more, not only the more, but the quality of that more. And if
Right.
you're not plugged into that, indicators like retention, both employee retention and staff retention, or customer retention, will show you that. Satisfaction, all the above. So the qualitative experience and the quantitative experience go hand in hand, all the way down from employee and staff to your end user, your end consumer. And I love what you said about whether it's student focused or employee focused. At the end of the day, it's really people focus, and
Right.
pulling up to look at that from a true 360-degree view versus, I need to make more revenue, so I'm going to skip the middleman, go to the end user, think about my marketing dollars, think about X, Y, and Z. Wait a minute, there's a whole missing component here. And
Right.
while we're not trying to overcomplicate it, it doesn't have to be complicated, but you do have to be thinking about it.
Right. Right. And then, getting back to the systems and processes and policies, that kind of thing, it's really important to pull in the people that are utilizing those systems, those processes,
Yes.
those policies, to assess and vet and make sure that there isn't any ambiguity in the expectations and the roles and the responsibilities. And that, especially for larger organizations, does the left hand know what the right hand is doing? And
Yeah,
when you add a certain policy or process or whatever it is, do you understand the impact that that's going to have on the people that are implementing it?
100%.
And I think that's a missed opportunity as well, because that takes a lot of work. People, like you said, you want to be effective and do more and more and more, but ultimately what you're hearing is people that we're doing more with less, and there's a lot more getting put on my plate, but nothing's coming off. And so it's hard to advocate for those kinds of changes and those kinds of things, especially if senior leaders at organizations are not open to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. not to go anywhere in the realm of politics. That's not where I'm going with this, but I'm going to bring up Elon Musk only because I saw this reel recently. So this is the extent of why I'm bringing this up, and it's a connection to leadership. And who knows if this is true or not, right? But the essence of the message was he comes into his companies and he spends time with the people on the floor doing the work, understanding now the nature of how he's doing that. I have no idea. But again, my purpose in sharing this is going back to what you're saying, having that connection from the highest level seat to what's happening in the day to day is critical, because without that connection and that understanding, there is flawed thought strategy. You misdiagnose the root of the problem often. And I see this in my work a lot, where because of that disconnection, we end up pushing down from the top, and we've misdiagnosed the problem. We have expectations that aren't realistic. We're putting in strategies, policies, procedures, whatever, that aren't really going to address the data, the metric that we're concerned about. So true. So true. And then you just end up creating more of the same problems, and even more of different problems that you have to solve now, because you try to push too much down on these people in the middle. You've asked more of them. You're not supporting them potentially, or supporting them in the way they need to be supported. You don't see the metrics move that you want to see move. So you more. And eventually they go, I'm out. I don't want to do more. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't.
Right.
I'm fatigued.
Right. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've seen some institutions where, you bring up the issues with the policies and the process or certain things, and they're like, oh, well, that's not my job. That's HR, or that's this other entity, and it's like, well, I think from my perspective, it's everybody's job to make sure that, we're all in this together. Our goal should all be the same. And we just have to figure out how, each of us has responsibility and ownership for the things that we're doing and trying to accomplish.
Yeah. If there's a problem, let's fix it, because it's a problem, not just for us, it's showing up in multiple places. Right. So while I might not be the decision maker that can fix it, the responsibility I can take is, you know what, let's set up a call with Jodi, with Emily. Let's talk through this. Let's start the process of attempting to move this in a different direction. That is the responsibility that, you could say it's, if you have the title, if you're in that seat, that is your responsibility, and again, right. This is my opinion. But even folks who are, I think, individuals who maybe don't have that given title, or who aren't sitting in a certain seat, feel disempowered to say, well, I don't have the authority. I don't have the ability. And so what ends up happening is they probably have the best knowledge to drive change. But if we don't have this empowered culture, or the openness, or the, hey, bring this to me, let's talk about it, and then let's do something about it. I'm going to go with you, charge this forward. I'm going to empower you, teach you, let's use it as a skill development opportunity. I'm really getting on my soapbox now, Emily, but that's where true change and cultures get developed, and people sitting in the seat who are doing the job every day feel like, man, I know Emily's going to be excited if I bring this to her, and she's going to do something about it.
Right.
There's no better way to kill a culture than for employees to be like, oh, I'm not going to bring it to Jodi. She's just going to be like, oh yeah, that's a problem. That's really sucks.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The open dialogue, the ability to discuss honestly about issues and challenges, the transparent communication. And that's, just like you said, it's the employee looking up to their supervisor, their leaders, to be able to have those conversations and to know that their leader is going to respect that and be open to that and validate and do something with it. Because there's nothing worse than an employee trying to advocate for their own healthy boundaries and it being misinterpreted by their supervisor as, oh, they're just lazy because they don't want to answer my email after 5 o'clock. Or so, yes, there has to be that that open give and take, that willingness to understand that I need to hear these people's concerns and their issues and advocate and advocate up for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, Emily, you and I could talk all day long. I love it. There's so much synergy here. It's exciting. I really appreciate the conversation today. And I know, when we first started off, I said right away, I know you all are going to benefit from this. And there's no doubt in my mind. I appreciate your willingness to share your journey, share it authentically. I also really appreciate your innate passion for this work collectively, the collective work that needs to be done, and the awareness around the people focus. And what does that really mean? It's not just about having a wellness program that you can say, we have this wellness program. Oh, and maybe if you're lucky, you get $100 once a quarter to,
Right.
That's nice. I'm not discounting that, but what are you really doing in the day-to-day to take care of and develop your people? That's the magic. That's the power. That's the transformation that has the opportunity to happen. And maybe people listening to this disagree. I don't know, Emily, maybe it's just you and I that are like, yes, this is the way, follow us, but anyway, I hope this question doesn't put you on the spot, because I think I don't think it will. Words of wisdom. So I know you've already given a lot, but if I were to say your final words of wisdom about life to anybody listening to this, what would that be for you?
Oh, about life, I would say do the work to show up authentically, because that's, when you're not yourself, it's not worth it. You're doing everyone a disservice, most of all yourself. And so for me, that would be the words of wisdom. Show up authentically, do the work to remember who you are.
And I'll ask a follow-up to that. If someone listening to this says, okay, I can hear it, but I don't know where to start. Where do I start to do the work to show up authentically? What would be and again, this is just Emily's opinion.
Yeah.
What's the first step?
Well, you have to look inward, and you have to be brutally honest with yourself, and the things that are scaring you the most and that you're trying to resist the most are probably the things that you need to look into the most.
What a perfect ending. Yes. Yeah. Looking in the mirror, and the stuff that's scaring you, that is the toughest, maybe the not stuff that you want to look at or be honest with yourself about. That's a great starting point. Yeah. And thinking of it as it's just information, right? It's just data. You don't have to pull it out and beat yourself up and look at it and commiserate it. You can, but is that really helping you?
Right.
But having the courage to look at it and pull it apart and understand it is a fantastic suggestion as a place to start.
Thank you.
Dr. Emily Garber, everyone. Thank you for being here. Again, thank you for sharing. And so if folks listening to this felt as inspired by you and connected to you as I did in our conversation, can they connect with you on LinkedIn? What is the best way to reach you and talk about compassion fatigue or physical therapy and PhD in psychology and all that good work that you're doing?
Absolutely. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would welcome it with open arms.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. And I just appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. All right, everybody. We will see you again soon on our next episode. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening. If you're ready to begin your personal Zen Leader journey, head over to ZenLeader.org and sign up for our Zen Leader Masterclass course, Climbing the Ladder and Staying Calm in the Chaos. Zen Leader also offers customizable group coaching programs and workshops to fit organizations and industries of any size. Whether you're looking to tap into your confidence, discover your voice, or find tranquility amidst the chaos, Zen Leader is here to support you every step of the way.